All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition, a special edition of No Holds Barred Wrestling Podcast here on FTSN. I'm here joined always by my tag team partner, Josh Kimmel. Josh, my man, before we get into it, how the hell are you?
Well, I'm feeling a little bit intellectual today, Bobby, because my IQ went up. I read a full book. I haven't read a full book since can't say high school. Didn't read them there. So I read a full book this week, Bobby, in 4 days, world record. So I'm doing pretty good. Brain is fried. My vocabulary is off the charts. So excuse me if I use my smart Chris Jericho 2008 heel vocabulary today.
There you
I'm
go.
feeling
That's
good,
okay.
Bobby. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. We got family in town. I mean, they're out right now, so I'll regroup with them afterwards. But I'm doing really good. We had a chance, like you said, I read a book in a short amount of time. It was an awesome book. We're going to talk about it. Which is Marc Raimondi's NWO. Say hello to the bad guys. How pro wrestling's new world order changed America. Mark was supposed to join us. He was with us for 40 minutes, but we had some really annoying technical difficulties with StreamYard connection issues. And we tried everything. He tried everything, going to different from off Wi-Fi, on Wi-Fi, jumped in and out 20 times. So we're going to regroup with him on another day to come on and talk about his new book. But we're going to talk about it today. We're going to talk about the NWO and the New World Order. So we're excited to talk about his new book, to talk about the NWO. To me, in my opinion, the greatest faction in pro wrestling history. Obviously, based off his book, proof by his book alone, the most impactful book in the most impactful group in pro wrestling history. So I want to thank Mark for trying to be with us. He was awesome behind the scenes. I mean, he's a good dude. So we look forward to regrouping with him to talk about his book and just talk about what the NWO meant to him. But as live streaming goes, as trying to schedule stuff to go on, this type of stuff happens. So I had just gotten over a bad headache, took some ibuprofen earlier today. Headache comes back now, but that's okay. We regroup and move forward. But Josh, let me just ask you, my man, because you said it, man. We went to town on this book, and not just because we had to, because we were going to talk to Mark about it, but because this was to me, it was a great book. It was hard to put down. It was insightful. The stories were awesome. It's such a nostalgic run. What I loved about the book that Mark had was not just stories that we were already familiar with, but he was telling the story from basically the viewer's perspective as fans growing up, but also the behind the scenes stuff and how it impacted it, wrestling. Let me just ask you, man, what did you think of this book when we got it, you got it in your hands? What did you expect before you read it? And then what did you think of it after you were done with it?
Well, I was super excited when you texted me Monday, actually. And you're like, hey, Josh, I just DM'd Mark to come on our show to talk about this book that he's writing. And here I go. Okay, cool. Right on. I love the NWO. I don't read books, but I'll definitely read this one. Then you said, hey, we got a copy. Boom. Here's the PDF. Because what I did was I went to Amazon right away when you said he was booked,
I
and I went to go buy the book. So I just want to let everyone know watching right now, it's not out yet till June 24th. Available anywhere books are sold, right?
Yep.
Amazon. I pre-ordered mine. I do already have a copy. I already read it cover to cover, but I think I collect cool book covers, even though I don't read them. And interesting topic. So I've already pre-ordered mine on Amazon.com. You should too. Father's Day is coming around the corner. If you have a father or you are a father and you want to, it's a great book overall. So yes, I was excited to get into the book. I didn't have any expectations. First thing I did, brother, was go, okay, how many pages? Because we had because we had a limit. We got, I didn't start the book till Tuesday, and I finished it today at 2:00. Not because it was such a drag to read. No. It's because we're so busy, and it's Father's Day weekend coming up, and all this fun stuff. So I knocked out the last 100 pages today, and I couldn't put it down. It was awesome. I had a great time reading this book. I can't wait to get into it with you, because there was things in that book that, of course, we know, but things that triggered me. And that's going to be Hogan, brother.
Oh
And just for
my
it is,
gosh.
man. Because it makes me think. I'm like, okay, Hogan is Hogan. He's wrestling. He made wrestling what it is. Not going to sit there and just say that he's not valuable to the business. He is.
Absolutely.
But I truly believe at the end of the day, when Hogan kicked Bischoff out of his house for wanting to turn heel, and then he found out Sting was going to do it, that wasn't Hogan trying to do something for the business. That was Hogan's jealousy of going, I want that spot. And it just shows you right then and there, with all of his power, yes, this NWO thing is going to be a thing. It's going to be awesome. But how is he going to screw it up? How is he going to implode this from the inside? And he basically did. That's what I got away from the book, especially from everyone's perspectives. And I want, I don't know how you felt about that. Did you get that perspective at all from Hogan or in this book, at least?
Well, when you're talking about when Bischoff first approached Hogan, and Mark has great details in the book about, and I love how he talked about how he flew and how Hogan was, we all know Hogan does this and he's looking, and we talked about this on the show where, I mean, they all do it. It's not just Hogan. Hogan's not the only one who goes, doesn't work for me, brother. Or he says it later on when he talks about, okay, you're going to lose to Sting. And Hogan says basically, okay, but what's next? What happens now? What's the next step? You got to protect the character. And they say, and he talks about why Hogan was like that. It was when McMahon went to Hogan after Hogan was basically carrying WWF on his with Hulkamania, which started a little before Vince McMahon. That was also talked about in the book, and how when McMahon approached Hogan about, hey, you're going to lose the Warrior. And Hogan, of course, didn't have that control. He had to go basically, I mean, he could, because McMahon wasn't going to crap on his biggest attraction, but Hogan basically rode with it, and we saw what happened with it. It didn't work. It failed. They had to go rewrite it and go back to Hogan with Sergeant Slaughter. So Hogan afterwards, they talked, Mark puts it beautifully how Hogan was, hey man, I got to protect my character. I got to protect me. I got to protect my pocketbook. Him and Kevin Nash, he says it there too, and which is obvious because Hogan, obviously he loves professional wrestling still to this day, but Hogan is still very well off, as is Kevin Nash, because they protected their pocketbooks. It was a business, something they love, but they love the business more. So to me, you're saying, when you talk about how Hogan at first was like, I got to protect myself. I got to look out for me. I'm not thinking about doing that. When I think it had to do nothing with Sting, it had to do with looking at the hot attraction with Kevin Nash and Scott Hall when they came over, and he sees how the fans are reacting, and he sees how cool Nash and Hall were being and how that story, he said, wait a second. And he came back as, who's the third man? And instead of him saying Sting, Bischoff goes, well, who do you think should be the third man? Bischoff knew what he was doing. He knew who he really wanted to be the third man. And Hogan said, it's me. And honestly, and I was going to ask Mark this, and I will ask him when we get him on, because I really want to hear his perspective as a fan, as an author writing this book. But, what would have happened, if it wasn't Hogan, if it was Sting? Imagine if the third man was Sting, with the neon tights and he goes in there and it's Sting, he's the third man, and it's him, Hulk. You think the NWO would have that impact that it had if it wasn't Hulk Hogan? Do you really think 30 years ago, 30 years later, that people would be like, man, NWO was the greatest faction ever in professional wrestling? No. Why? Now, don't get me wrong. If Nash and Hall never went to WCW, we wouldn't be talking about the NWO. Wrestling wouldn't be what it is today. But the NWO would not be the NWO if it wasn't for Hollywood Hulk Hogan. So that's, I mean, reading that and thinking, and I sat there and I thought about it. I was looking, I was like, what if it was Sting? It would not have been the same.
No, it wouldn't have been the same. That's where I struggle as a fan and someone that watches the product, just going, man, I see this as Hogan being selfish, going, I got to latch onto what's cool and take a spot away from Sting because I'm the king. I'm the number one. And then it worked. But then it worked too well. And then he got too powerful and he decided to screw everybody. Like the whole Waltman situation, getting fired, going to the WWF, saying what he said on WWF television. Hogan didn't want to be outnumbered. Wanted to show him who's boss. Even within, a faction, they're supposed to be brothers. They're supposed to be on the same team, same direction. I don't think Hogan ever was. Hogan was always about himself, no matter what. Survival of the fittest. How am I going to survive the longest? How am I going to leech off of anything, any success? How am I going to do it? And that's what he did. But he did it well. Like he did it well. I'm not saying anything bad about Hogan and the NWO. Just if it was Sting, I wonder if Hall and Nash would have had more of an influence and what direction they would have went. Because we from the start, Hall and Nash was well documented, especially in this book, where the promos that they were filming, Hogan wasn't on cue with them. He was doing these 80 promos, yelling about this and that, this and that. Where Hall and Nash were like, this isn't our vibe. So from the start, they didn't even mesh. I wonder if because Sting listened to Hall, Sting's the whole Sting costume, the whole Sting aura, the whole Sting crow aura was from
But
Scott
think about
Hall.
that. If yeah, you're 100%, and that's one thing I love. Well, okay, Mark's book, guys, and again, as Josh has eloquently brought up at the beginning, it releases on June 24th, which is my wife's birthday, which is my wedding anniversary. So big day. And now release of Say Hello to the Bad Guys. They could be purchased on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books A Million, Walmart, anywhere books are sold. Get it. It is awesome. One thing that I love about it is that it doesn't just straight go into the story. It talks about Hogan and like Hogan, how he started, when he got to WWF, his growth in WWF, when he decided to leave and go to WCW, Kevin Nash as Diesel, his run, and then Scott Hall, Razor Ramon talks about, his run with crime and how he goes to become Razor Ramon, and for first Diamond Stud, and then goes into what he did in WCW. And this was well known to true diehard wrestling fans about the impact that Scott Hall had in professional wrestling, and not just in the ring, but outside the ring. I mean, again, we talked about what the NWO would have been if it would have been Sting. It would not have been what it is today. That's a fact, my opinion. But also think about it. If Sting would have been the third man, we would not have gotten the Crow Sting. That would not have happened. The only reason why that run happened, and Sting still would have gone down as a legend because he was in NWA and NWA and WCW, Surfer Sting, all that was awesome. But it never would have happened if Hogan and the NWO was not what it was. So I don't think it was much. He took that spot from Sting, but originally it was supposed to be him anyway, because that's what Hogan, Bischoff approached Hogan about it. And Hogan said, no. Nah. But then when he started seeing what was happening, Hogan being the business guy that he was and knowing where this was going, he was like, no, I'm getting into this. I'll be this. And guess what? It paid off. And guess what? That's why Hogan is who Hogan is to professional wrestling. Not talking about what it is now. What what the name Terry Bollea and everything else. I mean, if it just would not have jived. There would have been no New World Order. It would have been the Outsiders. They would have been cool. But it kind of would have just kind of molded together. Who knows what they would have been, but it would not have had the impact had not Hogan joined it. But it all goes for the same thing. It would not have the impact if Nash wasn't there. It would not have the same impact if Hall wasn't involved. Those guys, but that's why when it started becoming bloated, and you started adding 20 different members, and just throwing guys in there, it kind of was like, and that's why it started kind of losing its luster. And that's why, he talks about it in there, the finger poke of doom. It was like, hey, let's kind of reset this. And it was kind of already too late at that point. I understood it. That's why, again, and Hogan brought it up. It said it in the book. Mark brought it up in the book, where it would not have made sense for Sting to be the third man. In the end, it would not have made sense, because this was supposed to be, quote unquote, even though Eric Bischoff will deny it, and right, because or denied it then because of legal issues or whatever, but they kind of played off like, oh, Scott Hall, this is Razor Ramon coming to WCW. This is an invasion angle going on here, and that's why Hogan would have made. Hogan was WCW or WWE. He was WWF. That was Hulk. Yep. That was Vince McMahon's lead dog. That's what made WWF was Hulk Hogan. So who better be the third man than be Hulk Hogan? So here's Diesel, Razor Ramon, and the real American Hulk Hogan as the NWO invading WCW. If he were going to, oh, here, where we are, who we are, but you don't know why we're here. Oh, here comes Sting. Sting was never a part of the WWF. It never would have probably would have been better legally for Bischoff to say, no, those guys, look, Sting is not WWF. You never had him. You know, it would have been better for him, but it just would not have had the same deal.
No,
So,
you're right. You're right.
you know, my thing is, look, I understand the Hogan stuff, the hate and whatever the hell and whatever, oh, he never put anybody over, even though he put a lot of people over. Oh, he took people's spots, even though he was the spot. Everybody was trying to get his spot. That's why Warrior held McMahon hostage for money. And that's why, they all went to WCW. They all followed Hogan there. Think about that. They all followed Hogan there. Hogan, even though Macho hated Hogan, he followed Hogan to WCW. Hogan was the one who brought Macho in. He brought the Warrior in. They all followed Hogan's way. So it's kind of like he's the pillar. And that's what I got from it. And you're right. He brought it up, but also a lot of what he had done, and same thing with Nash, same thing with Hall's issues off screen. It all tore it back down. And Bischoff as well, who, again, I'm going to shout out Eric Bischoff, because think about where he, it talks about in the book where he started, where he got, and then how he took advantage of that situation and blew it up. And think about this too, where WWF was, there was no Mr. McMahon before there was an Eric Bischoff. Eric Bischoff was already the evil, sinister boss, teaming up with Hogan, killing the baby faces and all this before there was a Mr. McMahon, and I guess invitation is the best form of flattery or whatever. I don't know how that saying goes.
You said it right.
Did I? Good. But I was reading this and it's like, it's so true. What this helped WCW, the NWO changed professional wrestling for all of time. Like WWE was still cartoony. Here's the, the oversized grown dudes, or not even at that point, they were, because of the steroid scandal, you had Bret Hart and the Shawn Michaels, but it was still kind of cartoony. Guess what? Mr. McMahon, Eric Bischoff, character-wise, the character who was a part of the game was before Mr. McMahon. DX was after the NWO. They were doing the chops before DX was doing the chops, which was, of course, Six-Pac, and then, of course, they adapted it and they started doing it. That was all an answer to the NWO. Guaranteed Deals was after the NWO. That was after Kevin Nash and Scott Hall. So, I mean, that's what I took from it. And, and of course, the epicenter of all this was Hogan, Nash, and Hall. So people can hate on that all they want, but nowadays those contracts started off from them. What wrestling is today is because of the NWO.
Yeah, no argument there. No argument at all. I want to ask you a question, Bobby, because we were talking about Sting a lot, and we all know the main event where Hogan beat Sting, and for some reason Bret Hart came out and overturned it.
Starcade.
I know. And then it was 97, right?
Mm-hmm.
86? Yeah, 97. And then Sting wins the belt, like what, a couple minutes later? Why? What you defend Hogan on this one, and would you think it would have been a bigger impact on the NWO story if Sting won clean right away? Do you think Hogan's logic of I gotta win first, brother, and then get it overturned, do you think that logic made any sense to your brain at all? Like as a viewer or now as a reader of this book? Because to me, it makes no sense. You beat someone, it gets overturned, then you lose like 3 minutes later. What? I don't get it, bro. Can you explain that to me?
So, yeah. So what you're talking, first off, it was a screwy finish. What had happened was, and this is public knowledge, and again, you could read this all in great detail in Mark's book, Say Hello to the Bad Guys. But this is not something that's spoiling or anything, but there's his side, her side, the truth. I know, you're harping on Hogan, which is okay. But this was Eric Bischoff, Sting, Nick Patrick, the referee. They all have different stories, and it's all said in this book, and I've heard them all before. So what was supposed to happen, according to whoever you want to believe, but it makes logic sense, was that Hogan was supposed to get the pin, and it was supposed to be a fast count, or Sting was supposed to kick out at the fast count, but it was supposed to be hand raised, and then Bret Hart was supposed to come out and say, no, not again. You're not screwing over anybody else, because he just got out of the screw job, and restart the match. And then that's when Sting would have won. Yes, if you're talking about being a heel, and Nick Patrick was going in between, like they were teasing that he was the heel referee working for the NWO, makes all the sense in the world. If it went that way, it did not go that way. And then Nick Patrick, I think, I believe his stuff more than anyone else's when he's kind of going, man, I heard three different people. Hogan was saying, do it very slow. Bischoff said, and Sting said, go very fast, do it fast. And Bischoff said, do the normal count, but Sting's supposed to kick out, but ring the bell or some crap like that, but it was a normal count, and it just came off wrong. And I'm not trying to hate on anyone. I'm not. But you say, Hogan, it goes to me. It's who does it end to begin with? It's Eric Bischoff. Bischoff
No.
should, yes, he's
Creative
the boss.
Creative control.
Doesn't matter if he has creative control. Then you just got to go with whatever the hell he's saying. That way, it's a cleaner look.
You read this quote from Hogan, and I laughed out loud. He was talking about some kind of finish. I think it was either probably the finger poke of doom. He's like, stupid finish, dumb finish. Whoever thought of that stupid? Brother, you were the end all be all of your matches and everyone else's matches. So what do you mean? So everything that happened in a Hogan match is directly one man's fault because he was the only person that could say yes or no to anything.
And again, okay, let's say that, right? We'll roll it because he did have creative control, which again, whose fault is that? Is it Hogan's for having creative control? No. Would you ask for creative control? You goddamn right. Would Mercedes Moné or Roman Reigns or John Cena or whomever, would they ask for creative control if they could get it? Absolutely. Who gave it to Hogan? Eric Bischoff. So at that point in time, when you do that, then guess what? When you go, okay, guys, hey, look, this is my idea, Hogan. I want to do this. Doesn't work for me, brother. I think we should roll with this. All right, let's figure out a way to get Hogan's thing across, making it look clean as hell, as we can make it look as. But what happened? Sting was saying one thing, Hogan was saying the other, Eric was saying the other, Nick Patrick was going, damn, what am I supposed to do? So he did it, got the hell out of there, and guess what? It killed Bret Hart's WCW run, started the killing of it. He just got there. It wasn't believable on Sting's part. First off, Sting was going through a lot of things. Let's not ignore that. He had this monster run without doing anything, was sitting up in the rafters. We all loved it. I was a Sting fan, but you read this book and you're seeing which I've already heard these stories before, know these stories, but Mark puts it great in there. And, where, Sting was up in these rafters and just making these appearances, which was working. It was great. You didn't need him to do anything. But then when you're getting up on to this main event where this is the epic clash, it broke records. It did better than WrestleMania. It was everything it had to be, and guess what? It wasn't just Sting. It was Hogan too, because guess what? Hogan did it with Roddy Piper, who was past his prime. He did it with the Macho Man, which was past his prime. So hate on Hogan all you want, but he was selling tickets. People were buying it. There were a lot of Joshes who were like, I'm sick of Hogan, but we're watching it because it was Hogan, whoever he was. I hope Piper beats him. He beat him, but not for the title. But again, Sting had this moment. He knew what was going to happen. Did he come out looking like $1 million? Nope. He was having issues at home, which is what happens in life. I get it. That sucks. But, Bischoff says that, there was, he didn't have a tan, which was, I guess, a big deal. He wasn't in great shape. He was depressed. He was on pills. He was on this. He couldn't handle it. You know who you never heard that about? And we know he partied. But you know who you never? Hogan. Hogan never had those issues. Right? Scott Hall suffered from that. Kevin Nash, we know, did all that stuff, but did he ever show it on screen? No. Ric Flair, was he ever showing it? No. But Sting that night was. He wasn't built for the moment. So do I believe Nick Patrick when he says that 3 people were telling him 3 different things? Absolutely. So who does that fall on, in my opinion? That falls on Eric Bischoff. That you're the boss. If you gave Hogan this power to say, now, okay, let's go ahead and drop. Okay, well, okay, Bischoff. Okay, Eric, let's do this. If we're going to drop it to Sting, what's next? Okay, well, let's do this. Or Hogan comes and goes, hey, man, I don't like the way he looks. We got to change. We got to change his up. Well, I gave Hogan the power. He has 50% of control or 70%. So how can we make this look better? I don't blame Hogan for that. Hogan has the power. I blame the boss. It's easy to blame Hogan. Oh, Hogan did this. But we're going to go ahead and give Sting scot-free. We're going to make Eric Bischoff scot-free.
I'm just saying.
I'm just saying, man. I mean,
it just seems like
guess what?
Hogan just does things that work out for Hogan, and
where was WCW for 83 straight weeks?
They were doing,
on top of the wrestling world.
They were doing pretty good. Okay, let's get past the Hogan stuff of the
Are we?
whole
I mean, it
book.
looks like
We're
you're
not.
sticking to that. You're gonna get
We
back to it,
still
aren't
got
you? Yeah, we got a
20
whole
minutes
thing.
left.
Yeah.
We got 20 minutes. No, we got 20 minutes left in the show here. I
All
don't
right.
think I want to spend 20 more minutes of Hogan at all. I want to go into maybe possibly members of the NWO. Members that I totally forgot that were in the NWO as I was reading this book. Dusty Rhodes.
Yeah.
Um, like what? Um, who else? Who
Ted
else? Vincent.
DiBiase,
I
Vincent.
forgot about Vincent. I knew
Which
about
is
Ted. I
I
remember
love the
Ted
backstory to
DiBiase.
that. He was Virgil in WWF because of it was a rub off of Dusty Rhodes. It was kind of a tribute or a joke to Dusty Rhodes because that's his real name. And then when he came to WCW, his name was Vincent in a kind of rib to Vince McMahon. So
Yep.
it's just very interesting backstories. But IRS, Ted DiBiase, Dusty Rhodes,
Bret Hart.
which never made sense to me at all. That was always the biggest. I just don't know. I'll never understand that. And again, Eric Bischoff has the keys to all that. And
So
you
there
can't
was
tell me. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, there was a quote in there from Buff, the stuff saying like, I think it was Buff Bagwell being approached to be in the NWO. It could have been someone else. I apologize.
I think it was
And
Buff Bagwell.
yeah, I want to be in the NWO. Like it's the hottest thing in the world. You want to be in the hottest thing, and then years later you hear people like Jericho, and they wanted to get Jericho in the NWO, and his whole thing was no, there's too many people in the NWO, nobody stands out anymore. I don't want to be in the NWO because they were going to get him in there, and he told the story about no, I'm good. I don't want to join your group. I'd rather be a solo act. And I wonder if there was people that thought that they were going to join the NWO and become instant stars because they were joining left and right, but nobody was getting over. It was only the same 3 or 4 or 5 people. Everybody else was just a clown.
I think and they talked about that there, or Mark brought it up about the B team, which we remember. There was the NWO Elite, and then there was the B team, which was Stevie Ray and Brian Adams, I believe, and so forth. But I think it had a lot to do with the money. You go where the money is, and yeah, Buff Bagwell, Marcus Bagwell, at one time was viewed, as as one of the future stars of WCW. Obviously, NWO took over. NWO was on top of the world. They the whole idea of, we're gonna create a second show with NWO. That never would. I don't know the logic behind that. I understand the brands, doing a brand, but that whole idea didn't work. They talked about in the NWO sold out, how that didn't work. It's just, I don't know. And so I know about, it became the most popular thing. So let's get a big brand, because you can't have the same 4 guys.
Right.
They got to have a power, like, hey man, I have all these people. It would have worked if you probably would have limited to like that 10, whatever, you got 10 guys and you have the under guys, and then because you can't have the same people coming out over and over again. But it did get inflated. What I will say was pretty cool. I always saw him before that, but I didn't remember this. But I've seen him in WWE 2K, but I love that Mark brought this up in the book, was the NWO's influence in Japan, the impact it had in Japan, in New Japan Pro Wrestling, where they had a wrestler from there join the NWO. When he brought it over to Japan, it blew up, and they had their own group down there. And so much so that there's some backstories there that they had some issues with Shaw because of merchandise sales and whatever. But it just tells you how big and important the NWO was to professional wrestling even then, that people are like, holy crap, this is the coolest freaking thing in the world. You have, again, this guy who was supposed to be larger than life, the greatest babyface in wrestling at that time. Now he's the biggest heel, and you have the 2 coolest guys behind him. That's one thing about Nash and Hall. They were naturally cool dudes. Like, you were drawn to them. Back then heels were like, if Hogan was his own heel, if Hogan was just a heel by himself, like if he actually did what he wanted to do in WWF, was turn on the Ultimate Warrior and be a heel, but McMahon's like, that's not gonna fucking work. We're not gonna do that. If he would have done that, even though might have had a major impact because it's Hogan, I don't know if it would have had the same impact as Hollywood Hogan with Nash and Hall. Nash and Hall made it cool. Hollywood Hogan was a very cool heel, but that's because he got rubbed from Nash and Hall. Nash and Hall were the ones who made it cool to be a bad guy. When bad guys were always, oh my God, what are you gonna do? And were like that. But when the baby faces were talking down at Nash and Hall, and then Nash would be like, ooh, and Hall would, that was like, damn, those are cool dudes.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So just that impact and how it transcended into another country, and how it probably went, I don't know, what it did. Obviously it influenced WWE. They couldn't take the NWO, but eventually, like, okay, what can we do to answer the NWO? Okay, DX. They had two of the members. I was thinking, you and I, we both play 2K, WWE 2K, and we, I have my own little, I have a one where I just put everybody in there and just run with it, and then I have like, oh, what if WCW survived? But there's times where I'll do like, okay, Triple H and Shawn Michaels went to WCW. They make the Click, the New World Order. That's what the Click was. Or if you go to WWF, DX was a version of the Click, except you added, you had X-Pac, you had Shawn Michaels, you had Triple H. Yep. Eventually added Road Dogg and Billy Gunn. In WCW, you had Kevin Nash and Scott Hall. That's the Click. If it's like, it was all like perfectly, I don't know if that makes any sense, but like, a mirror of each other, and how NWO influenced not just WCW, but the WWF, New Japan Pro Wrestling in general.
Yeah, I mean, even goes beyond that. Look at the Bullet Club; they were ROH, New Japan, all over the place too. It really it infected so many people. Like we're 30. I'm almost 40 this year. I was in middle school during this. Damn. I did not see live the NWO. I started watching already when Red and Black NWO Wolfpack were formed. That's when I started watching wrestling. So 1997. So I didn't see live the inception of anything, but I of course seen everything now. It was the cool thing to do, to go to school the next day and talk to your friends on Tuesday. Go, did you see Stone Cold do this to McMahon's car? No, but did you see, Disco Inferno in this match? And this, it was he's in, because Disco is in the NWO.
Wolfpack.
So it's like, did you see Scott Hall and Kevin Nash? That's what we talked about. NWO versus, it was, you're a WWF guy or you're a WCW guy, and we're kind of getting that now with AEW and WWE, but it's not to that extent whatsoever. Not even close, actually. Yeah, I don't think there's middle school people talking about that situation at all. But man, Bobby, how did it affect you and your family? Like, were you allowed to watch this stuff? Because it was edgy. My parents sometimes said, "Okay, bra and panty match."
Yeah, you and I have talked about this in the past. I was not a WWF Attitude Era guy. I was familiar with what was going on. I did, check in here and there, but I didn't really pay. I was all WCW. I mean, and and I was allowed to watch WCW. My dad would order, when I'd go visit my father on the weekends, he would order the $30 to $40, $50 pay-per-view, whatever it was at that time. And I was watching World War III, Fall Brawl War Games, NWO, Black and White, Hogan taking on Piper and Slamboree, and the Ultimate Warrior showing up. I remember, that's all. I didn't start watching WWF up until maybe WCW 2000. That around that time frame, I started tuning into WWF a lot more. And then when they were sold, I was already into WWF at that point. So, let me ask you this: with this book, again, we're familiar, and I want to talk about the culture impact and just overall something that was touched in this book that Mark was bringing up, and how it impacts politics, American culture, pop culture. Ric Flair is huge into pop culture right now, but so is the NWO. I mean, it's all over the place. But before we get into that, is there anything in this book that you read that, since, you and I are very familiar wrestling historians, we love pro wrestling, we love the history of wrestling, we're WCW, NWO guys. But was there anything in this book that you read and you're like, holy crap, I didn't know that? Is there anything that took you not by surprise, but something that you went, whoa, that's cool? Or
mainly the stories. Like, the story with DDP getting pulled up from the rafters from Sting being saved. that story. I never heard the backstory of that at all.
Macho Man's part of that made me laugh when they approached Macho Man. And he was like, no, bro, I ain't doing it. And it had nothing to do with going up and flying up. It was it was just the way it would have gone down, you know, the way it
Yeah.
was put together. And I don't want to spoil that, but that's a good story. I
So
laughed at that.
some of the stories I'm like, wow, that was a cool story. Like I never heard that story with Bischoff and the New Japan. That's a story I never heard as well. So I mean, there's a lot. It's fun because you're reading the chapters. The way Mark wrote this book is basically chronicalized. I can't say that word, but it goes in chronological order of the NWO and their matches and their feuds. That's what it is. And in between, it's just stories of like, oh, this is relevant to this era or this time of this storyline. And it's just the stories was what kept me going because I'm like, I already saw this. I know what happens here. Although Mark does detail it fine and it's great and I love it, but I'm like, let me get to the stories, man. Because that's honestly at the end of the day, when I'm just chilling, playing Fortnite or relaxing or smoking or whatever, I like putting on shoot interviews or wrestling
Yes,
podcast interviews because
yes.
they shoot straight, man. Like these wrestlers tell stories because there's so many of them. They're on the road all day, every day together. Imagine if you were like with 30 other dudes all the time. And then on top of that, you subsection yourself to three other dudes or girls driving in cars all the time, town to town. And then you all meet up again in the same city. Like, just imagine that. That's like
Yeah.
a freaking work party road trip 24/7. They're going to have thousands of stories. And stories is what keeps me into pro wrestling. And hearing their stories behind the scenes is even better. So I love the stories. I loved reading all the stories.
I'm with you. You know, and I think Mark does an awesome job. And you know, again, what's great about it too is, we'll connect with Mark again. Marc Raimondi was on with us. He was supposed to be on with us to discuss his new book, but we had some technical difficulties on his end. That happens. Life happens. We apologize for that. You know, he was very apologetic, but we did talk about reconnecting and getting him on here to talk about his book and talk about the NWO. But we wanted to come on here and talk about it, and I mean, he did a great job. Again, he's an ESPN reporter. He's a beat reporter for the Atlanta Falcons. He's covered combat sports, MMA, UFC, pro wrestling, and decided to write this book. And I don't, I believe somebody approached him because of an article he wrote about the NWO. Say, hey, would you like to do this? And so it's an awesome story. So I really can't wait to hear his part of that. But I'm with you. You know, the way he told this story, and these were stories that we've kind of heard before. Not all of them. There were some ones in there too that was, I love the stuff on Ric Flair with his personal heat with the NWO, and especially with X-Pac, who doesn't get enough credit for what he's done in the wrestling business. And I think Mark gives him that credit in this book, with the chop, and of course the influence that he's the only member that was in the NWO and in DX when it kind of was in their red hot times. So I just love the heat that he got with Ric Flair and him, how he smacked out of Ric Flair. He talks about how Ric Flair was gonna legit beat him up, chase him, and he pulled Ric Flair's pants. So there was like those little things where it's like, I love those stories, and the backstory about Sting, going up into the rafters and coming down from the rafters, and how it was the coolest thing. Now, as looking back, I'm like, it was cool back then, but I like how he talks about how they had to kind of test it out and how diligent they were with safety, and how when they first tested it, the bag came down really too fast, it kind of splattered, and things like, I'm not doing that. And of course he eventually did. Those were really cool. Let me ask you, because obviously this show alone is, especially the branding of the show, is enough to show the influence the NWO has, or it continues to have 30 years later. Our logo, what we grew up on, I mean, it's No Holds Barred, is a tribute to NWO. Even before meeting up with Mark or talking with Mark, I have that, mock poster, the graphic behind me of the New World Order. The NWO was a big deal. And so, you look at and it's, without even realizing it, if you actually pay attention like Mark did, you could see the influence the NWO still has on not just professional wrestling, but on America, and in pop culture. So I just thought it was so cool to see that, and for him to go into great detail on it in his book about not just entertainment, not just with celebrities, not just with people like us, with the fans who grew up doing it, but pro wrestling. I mean, excuse me, politics. The current climate that we're in now. You look at when Hogan announced that he was running for president. Back then, I remember those times quite well. But a lot of the stuff he was saying, he didn't say "Make America Great Again," but he kind of said we go back to what we were when we, and kind of reference to that. And you go now, not saying that President Trump took that slogan from that, but it's kind of highlights to what. And Hogan said it. He goes, "I could do anything, and the fans will still vote. People will still vote for me." President Trump has said that in the past. I could smack somebody in the face in the street and I'd still get votes. So it was kind of crazy to look at that and draw the parallels and go, wow. It was really cool. So it was crazy. So let me ask you now that, did you have that idea already in your head? Obviously, on fans, we know it influences us, but were you already kind of preconcept in your head that, yeah, man, no, NWO had a bigger impact than we believe, not just in wrestling, but in America?
Listen, he documented this in his book in the very open. When you walk in an airport, grocery store, Disney World, wherever, and you see an NWO shirt, you always throw up the Turkish wolf. You always do. You always do. And that's just, and there's no words. It's literally like, all right, right on. That's it. Right. And what other shirt has that impact in anywhere? Anywhere. It's always the NWO, right? You'll always get and basically wrestling shirts in general. I was at the mall a couple days ago. I saw a guy with an OTC shirt. I gave him the ones. It's just because we because we're such a I'll be honest, we're such a niche community and we stick together because we all enjoy one thing. And the rest of the world may not get it. Bob Costas may call this lowbrow and they may judge us, right? Yeah, but F Bob Costas. But we love it, man. And if we see someone rock the NWO, we know you're a G. My home fantasy league, we have a title belt spray paint. The first winner ever got to spray paint the world title belt. It's the big gold belt, NWO on it. And that's our championship. 10 of those people in our league don't even watch wrestling, brother. It's just but they still think it's cool. Have an NWO spray paint belt as our world championship, as our title. So any walk of life, walk into any place with an NWO shirt, you'll get looks, you'll get people talking, you'll start a conversation because anyone can relate to the NWO. Anybody, even Dennis Rodman, even principals. Seriously, anybody knows the NWO.
And I will just say too, you're 100% right and right on the money. And you brought up Dennis Rodman. That's something else that was really cool. But also talked about how influential NWO was. That they were able to, Dennis Rodman, Karl Malone, they sneak that storyline into the NBA Finals. I love that they kind of threw that in there, and it was like I remember I know of that story, but I didn't know that part. And so think about the influence the NWO had, that so much so that those guys that were playing for the greatest prize in basketball were like, no, I need to be in a WCW ring. Jay Leno, talk about his he was kind of having his own not Monday Night War, but late night wars with David Letterman. And so much so that when the NWO came calling and was like, hey, would you be interested in doing something? And he was like, hell yeah. Of course, he tied with DDP. When Hogan and Bischoff took over Light Night with Jay Leno, when they kicked him out, it beat Letterman. So it just shows you how influential that all is. It's so cool. And let me just say again, for those who love wrestling, love the NWO, Josh brought it great. Father's Day is tomorrow. But even then, birthdays, Father's Day, just a gift to somebody who loves the NWO, whether that's, you know, the group or Hollywood Hogan, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall. This book releases on June 24th. You could order it right now, pre-order it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Walmart, anywhere books are sold. This is going to be released. I'm going to be honest, you know, this is a must-have if you're a wrestling fan, if you're a New World Order fan for wrestling. It's hard to put down. The stories are addictive. You know, you want to keep going. You want to finish it. It's an easy read. And when I say that, I mean, Mark, you know, the way he writes it, it keeps you interested. I don't mean easy read like, hey, a fourth grader could read it. I mean like easy read where it's like if you're a wrestling fan or, you know, you want to know the backstories and everything, you're like, you can't put it down. You want to keep going. You know, the only reason why I had to put it down was work, family, and FTSN. You know, I was like, I gotta do this, I gotta do that. But and it was on my phone. If I had the hard copy, I'd probably be easier to go through it. But get it, enjoy it. It's an awesome read, and I hope it's not the last time. But you know, it sucks to know that, you know, our childhood, you know, is that far behind us. That these guys, you know, we already lost Scott Hall, you know, and that was a sad part that they brought up in the book, and you know, but to see that, you know, differences aside, but like he brings up at the very end, just the relationship Hogan and Nash still have, and you know, kind of how, you know, Nash was still kind of like, hey man, are you familiar with this? No, then fuck them. And he, you know, so that just tells you, you know, so that was cool. You know, just that brotherhood is still there. And that even though Hogan and Nash had the, you know, which makes sense behind the scenes, they were kind of with Hall was kind of button heads like, you know, hey man, you wouldn't be where you are if it wasn't for me. Well, this wouldn't be what it is if it wasn't for me. They were both right. And, you know, the NWO Wolfpack, you know, which is a sister group of the NWO, was for a short time. It's only, which is crazy how short it was just as impactful in a way that it cool, the music and all that. So I don't know, you know, it was an awesome book. It's an awesome book. I can't wait to get Mark on here. Sucks we weren't able to get him on today, but life happens. Totally cool. Look forward to having him on to discuss this book. I'm so grateful that he gave us the opportunity to read it beforehand. I will get this book. I may hopefully Mark maybe give me a signed copy. I don't know, down the line, you know, because I think he has a great future in this, man. I mean, I hope this is not the last book when it comes to pro wrestling, because he tells great stories. I would love to know the backstories to so many different, and maybe he goes individually at different guys, but I don't know. We'll ask him when we get him on. But Josh, any final thoughts before we wrap this one up, bro?
No, man, as a person who hasn't read a book ever in his life, I found this was an easy read because I enjoyed it so much. So I really encourage you to pre-order this book. I have already. I promise you I have. It's awesome. I cannot wait till it arrives. I can't wait to talk to you next week, Bobby, because we might be doing the Hogan Files.
Maybe, yes. We're gonna regroup on that. That was the original plan. But we will. That's gonna be a lot of fun because we're already kind of getting into it, you know.
That's why I said we're gonna save the Hogan stuff for later. All
that's
right,
right. There you go. So I know you're slipping, you're chopping at the bit. But you know, hey, you know what? Whether you love him, whether you hate him, and that goes for the NWO in general, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Hogan, because we know there's a lot of guys in, you know, from their eras that have a lot of hate for them. You know, I mean, we go down the line, but a lot of them, you know, have to thank the NWO faction for what wrestling is and what they got in the end, you know, and there's no doubt that those guys reaped those rewards as well. But whether you love them or hate them, there's no doubt that they impacted professional wrestling, not just in the work. There's bad things too, right? You point those out, but in the best of ways as well. So, hey, guys, June 24th, get onto Amazon, go to your Barnes and Noble, or go online, go get Say Hello to the Bad Guys, how professional wrestling's New World Order changed America. Awesome book. Mark, thank you for allowing us to read that. We look forward to speaking with you when we get a chance. Everyone else, thank you so much. Tune in next Saturday, 5 p.m. Eastern time for another episode of No Holds Barred Wrestling Podcast. I'm Bobby. That's Josh. Enjoy your Sunday. Happy Father's Day to all those dads out there who celebrate. Peace.